Um, the
Thank you.
recording should have begun. Great. And we can get started. So once again, thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to be talking about the power of storytelling in community work. I've had experience using stories, sharing the impact of our work. And so I'm glad to have the opportunity to take us through stories. So yeah, we need to begin by defining a story. And I think the best way that I can define a story is with a story. So I want us to paint a picture, and I want us to imagine that it's a bright and sunny day where you are and you live outside the city, where you can look at a couple of hills and there are lots of farms, and you want to go and meet your friend in the market. And so as you're walking, you decide to peep at one of the farms that you're so used to as you go. And you look inside the farm and you notice that the cows that are usually there actually have sweaters on. And you don't believe it at first, and you think your mind is playing tricks on you. And so you decide to rub your eyes and look again. And indeed, you notice that, yes, the cows do have sweaters on. So I will be really curious to know what your reaction would be like. And if you are able, you can just type it in the chat. You're walking and you see a cow with a sweater on. What will your reaction be? Confusion, Jix's confusion. Take out my phone, I'd laugh. I'd ask myself if I'm in a dream or if this is real. Exactly, those are the kind of reactions that we get. Now, believe it or not, this is actually true. And my reaction would be, yes, that's exciting, that's absurd. And I so much say that maybe I'd take a photo and see the most important bit is that I would want to tell somebody. Now, this is where I am going with this. The story is actually real. And this farmer in Jersey, which is one of the Channel Islands between England and France, decided to put on sweaters on her cows just to celebrate Christmas. And so this is actually something that happened. But as you take the photo and as you are excited and as you laugh, the thing that will come to your mind is, hey, I need to tell somebody. And you will rush to the market. You are initially going to meet your friend, but the first thing that you will tell them is, hey, do I have a story for you? And that's what a story is. If we were to define a story simply by the dictionary, it's an account of past events in someone's life or in the development of something. So based on this description, two things stand out. That one, it's an account. That means that it's a description or an explanation. So when you meet a friend, you have to describe what you saw. You have to explain it to them. As hard as it may be, you have to tell them that, hey, I saw a cow with a sweater on. And B, it is something that has to have happened, meaning you have to have seen something, you have to have heard something. And that's what a story is defined as in simple terms. And I hope that we can just remember this because there are so many definitions out there, but to strip it down to its meaning, it's an account of something that has happened, whether that's in your life or if it's in the development of something. Now, I want us to jump into why we should use stories for work, for our work. I believe that stories have the ability and the power to create awareness of your work, to inspire change, and to just bring about transformation in our communities. That's the power of a story. And in a couple of minutes now, I'm just going to take us through why we should use stories. What kind of power do they have? So I've really stripped down these reasons or these importances so that we can remember them as we go. Now, the first reason is that stories are engaging. That's the thing with stories, they engage somebody. I'm picturing myself talking to my friend and telling them about the cows that I've just seen. They will feed off of my excitement, of my emotion when I tell them that I have seen this, I have heard this. You have really engaged with the person you are talking about, you're talking to. And the power of a story lies in its ability to make complex information easier to understand. Stories draw us in emotionally and create a connection with the information or idea. The whole time you're giving a story, the person that you are talking to, the audience that you're talking to, whether that's another community worker, whether that's a stakeholder, whether that's a volunteer, a story has the ability to engage with them and foster a sense of trust and understanding. Trust in what you do, understanding in why you do what you do. And I know that in the organizations we work with, we want so much to tell people about ourselves. Well, one of the powers of a story is that it is able to capture and engage with the people that you're talking to. The second thing about stories is that stories are not easily forgotten. A couple of weeks from now, you may forget my name or even a mission statement of an organization, but you will remember that there was somebody 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, who told you about cows wearing sweaters. And that's because stories are engraved in our memory and they are not forgotten easily. According to a study, stories are remembered up to 22 times more than facts alone. And that's a really, really important piece of information to know about stories. So when you narrate a story about your work, it helps information stick in people's minds, making it more likely to be recalled and shared. I'm guided to the photo on the screen, and the moment they will be talking, they will remember something, maybe a story, and talk about it. And so the power lies in integrating your data and facts with stories so that they cannot easily be forgotten. Now, I want us to think of a story like a tape. If you would want to stick a paper to a wall, you wouldn't use water or saliva. Well, it will seem like a quick and an easy fix because it will stick, but then it wouldn't stick for long. But a story would be the tape that you need to keep the paper on the wall for longer. And so in the same way, stories stick and they do not easily go away from our memory. So again, as I mentioned earlier, you can easily forget a mission statement, and we know the struggle of somebody asking you, what does your organization do? What's the vision of your organization? And you might mix up your words, and the person that you tell the information you're giving might be impacted by what you have told them, but will the information stick when they are on their way back home? A story integrated with that information will more likely leave a lasting impact, and they can recall this in future when they're having more conversations, or if you would want another call to action. The other thing about stories and the power of a story is that a story persuades. So when people think of advocating for their ideas, they think of convincing arguments based on data, facts, and figures, which is okay, and I have no argument with that. Facts and data are good. How else are we able to know about what's going on without facts and figures and data? However, studies show that if you use a story, people are more likely to be persuaded. Now, at this point, I'd just like to pause and ask why. Why do you think that a story will most likely persuade people? And once again, you can just put on your answers in the chat section. Seeing Alison saying, I've seen cows wearing football shirts. That's also hilarious. D from Zambia says that it engages the heart. Agreed. It can connect with your own experiences. it's concrete. Exactly. One more. Sarah says that a story is often captivating and it holds your attention as you want to hear it until the end. And I agree. Well, the reason that a story will persuade the person that you're talking to, and I want you to look at the photo clearly, is that the people are really so captivated and engaged, and the person communicating wants to persuade them to doing what they, or rather to make a call to action. And the reason is because stories have an emotional appeal. Now, a story has the power to bring out empathy, which can break down barriers and get you the results you want. When you tell somebody a story, the person that you're talking to, one, they are really engaged with what you're saying. B, you have the confidence that this person will not forget. And C, they are really along with you for the ride. So whether you are excited and you're telling somebody an exciting story, they will be excited with you. Whether it's a sad story, they will be sad with you. The story has an emotional appeal. And so instead of using facts only, you can integrate a story and your audience will be moved both intellectually and emotionally. And as I go, I will talk about why emotion is important in the process of decision-making. But yes, stories do have an emotional appeal. We're moving on really well. I have 5 points, so I'm in my 4th. Stories help communicate your impact effectively. And I like what Matt said about Matt said about the stories and how they are concrete. And it's true because when you share real life success stories, it provides concrete evidence of the value of your work. And so when you communicate with stakeholders, whether that's a donor or a funder or a policymaker or just a member of your community, a story is a powerful way to show the impact of your work. Because the thing with real life success stories is that they are unrivaled. Nobody can contest the impact you have because of a story that you have shared. I would like to quickly talk about, let's give an example and talk about the impact of listening and how you can communicate with facts alone versus a story. So if somebody asks you, why should I listen? What will you tell them? Well, if you decide to go to the facts side of things, you have them at the fingertips of your hand. You can say, well, listening is good because it improves relationships. It's good because it improves my health and well-being. It has helped me become A and B. It has helped me become A and B. And that's good. Those are facts. But how will you go to the extra mile and make it concrete such that nobody can rival what you're saying and rival the impact that you are talking about? I wonder if we decide to use a story to communicate about the impact of listening, how that would turn out. If somebody sits me down and asks me, why should I listen? I wonder if I told a story maybe from an experience in my life about how I listened and how that promoted change. I wonder if that would make it stick, that will communicate the impact more effectively than if I just talked about the facts alone. And as we go along, I'm really happy to answer any questions. You can just pop them in the chat section as Sarah has said, and we'll get some time to answer the questions. And lastly, stories move to action. So as I said earlier, they persuade because they evoke emotion and they allow us to empathize with characters' experiences and feel connected to the message being conveyed. Now we know that emotions play a crucial role in decision-making and inspiring action. The difference between being moved intellectually alone and being moved both intellectually and emotionally is I might know all the facts about advocating for something, But then I'd just go, oh, well, that's sad. I hope that changes, and then move on with my life. But if I am moved emotionally, if I feel what the person communicating to me is feeling through a story of what has happened, then I am more likely to support and to pledge my support in one way or the other, whether that's using finances, whether that's using becoming a volunteer or giving my time. And that's why stories move to action, because if you give a compelling story, it can inspire those who are around you to take action and to get involved. So as I close my section, I just wanted to say that stories are engaging, they are not easily forgotten, and they have an emotional appeal that inspires action. Simply put, mission or vision statements, facts and data alone are good and informative, but they are not enough. Stories will stick. And so it is my hope that as we go on, we can use stories in our work so that we can see stronger and vibrant communities, and that it can also shape how we also communicate. And in a moment, Jake will join and just talk to us about how we can create stories that are engaging and are not forgotten, so that we can get the action that we want. But for now, I think that's my presentation. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll pass it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Brian. That's brilliant. It makes me want to think of lots of stories to get my message across. I really like the way that you spoke about how well remembered a story is, rather than listing, if you have a list of facts, do you remember it? And I like the way you talk about that you have the power to bring empathy and feeling from people. I really, really agree with that. And that you say if a story is sad, your audience will be sad with you. So then they're empathizing and they're resonating. And that really helps hold a message. So thank you for that. And the funny cows, which I will not forget, and I will tell people. I'd like to introduce Jake, who works with Brian and with both at Eureka Network and at Thrive. Jake has worked in the BBC for over 10 years. He works in communication skills, in marketing, with Thrive and with Arukah, and he's recorded a number of very interesting podcasts interviewing people, but I'll hand over to him and let him take it from here.
Thanks, Sarah. I've never been introduced like that before. It's quite nice. Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thanks, Sarah. I like what you said, Brian, about how stories stick, because I think I'm forever now going to be trying to work out how you get a jumper, a sweater onto a cow. It's like, is there a zip at the back or what? I don't know. I just can't imagine the process of getting a cow to wear a jumper. Anyway, I'm going to share my screen. So I'm just quickly going to plug what I do at Arukah before I start, but it is connected to storytelling. So yeah, like Sarah mentioned, I used to do the role that Brian does now, but I now make a podcast for Eureka, which is a co-production with Tearfun's Footsteps magazine. And yeah, if you go to the Eureka website and you'll see the podcast icon there, you can click on that and you'll find all sorts of episodes that aim to help people in their community work. And I'm going to whiz through what some of them are. Things like how to create a culture of problem solving, how to support people through loss, how to love your enemy, how to fight fake news, how to turn rubbish into money. It's a really interesting story from Nigeria there. How to coach others, how to learn from failure, how to set up a community health program, how to motivate others, and how to advocate for change. And those two last ones, how to motivate others and how to advocate for change, actually connects a lot to storytelling and what Brian's been talking about. I can see my cat's coming into the room now, so he's obviously inspired by us talking about storytelling. So yeah, do check that out. You'll find it, like I say, on our website, or if you have a podcast app on your mobile phone, then you'll find it there, and you can subscribe. And there's 53 episodes, I think, now, all quite practical. But yeah, getting on to what I want to talk about today. So storytelling, and Brian talked really eloquently there, and he talked, you know, when you're telling a story, you're talking to an audience, and I'm going to share a tool today for storytelling, but just to step back prior to that, I want us first to think about who it is you want to speak to and what you want to tell them, and then how you'll speak to them. So those are the three things I'm going to look at today, and it all centers to me around this diagram. So I've done bits of communication training in the past, and to me this is the basis for all of it, really. So good storytelling, I think, is about understanding the things you care about. And when I say you, that might be your organization, it might be your cluster, it might be whatever group you're involved in, or, you know, just whatever you're trying to achieve in your community work. And then knowing the things your audience cares about. So what is it that excites them? What kind of stories excite them? You know, if they have no interest in cows, maybe they'll be less interested in the cow story. I don't know. But so to me, good storytelling is about the overlap between the things you care about and the things your audience cares about. And so good storytelling really is about knowing what your audience cares about. And you know, I think the ultimate storyteller really is Jesus, in terms of the influence, impact, you know, what he achieved, what he did during his life, and, you know, what's happened subsequently. And I'm not a theologian, but the minister at my church recently talked about how Jesus, when he told a parable, they would often be quite relevant to the place in which he was speaking. So, for example, this image of the parable of the sower, he told in a more rural place, and then perhaps when he was talking in a city in Jerusalem or whatever, he would tell a story more suited to that audience. So, yeah, this idea of knowing your audience is you know, a proven technique. So when you think about your audience, I want people really to think about these three questions. Who is it you want to reach? What do they care about? And perhaps if you don't know that answer to that question, how are you going to get to know them better? And I think Arukah is really good at this last thing of how you get to know people groups better that you want to reach through the work that we do with SALT. And I won't talk about SALT now, but if you don't know about it, then, you know, ask Brian or Ted, and they'll be able to point you in the direction of resources and stories about what SALT is and how effective it is in helping get to know your audience better. But I just want to give an example of how, or a few case studies of how getting to know your audience better can inform what stories you tell. And these are going to be quite crude, sort of basic examples, but hopefully they give an indication of what I'm talking about. So, for example, imagine you want to tell a story to donors, and so you want to know what donors care about, and typically they're going to want to know about their money having a positive impact. And so naturally, the stories you want to tell are going to be perhaps of how you've used funds in the past to make a difference. And this is obviously a very basic example, but you can go into much more detail. For example, if the donors care in particular about education, you might want to tell stories around that, or health. And you can, the better you know your donors, the people you're trying to reach, the more you can tailor your stories to be about the things they care about. And then another case study. So thinking about young people locally, say, for example, now young people care about a lot of different things, don't they? But I've just come up with an example of finding a good job. And then you might tell, say, if you're a cluster and you want to get more people involved, perhaps you want to get more young people involved, you might want to tell a story about how getting involved in a cluster is a good way to gain work experience and network, get to know potential employers. And again, you could go into more detail. This is just a basic example. And then finally, local government. Now, I don't know what things are like in your part of the world, but here in the UK, and I understand in other places, local government, perhaps under a lot of financial pressures, and so they're perhaps looking for ways to reduce pressures on their work. And so again, if you're a cluster, you might want to talk about how your projects might make their lives, their work easier. So, for example, local government is often involved in refuse collection. Perhaps if you were involved in some sort of recycling projects that is maybe reducing the amount of refuse going to landfill, you might want to be telling stories around that, stories that are going to excite and interest local government. So again, just to reiterate, these three case studies, I've given quite basic examples, but the principle is the better you know the people you're trying to reach, the more you can tailor your stories to reach them, communicate to them, and do what Brian's talked about, appeal to their heart, and tell stories that stick in their mind. So yeah, we thought there about getting to know your audience and the things they care about. And now I'm just going to share a model for telling stories. And I've shared this quite a few times in the past with cluster members in training. And it's actually, I can't remember, I didn't come up with this. It's not my invention. I think somebody told it to me as it was actually a way of telling stories in job interviews. And I think I remember using it in job interviews, but to me, it has implications. I use it all the time, really. I used it at the BBC, I use it in my job at Thrive, I use it making the podcast. I'm using it today in presenting to you. But I'll talk through this very simple model and give an example, and then we'll wrap up. So STAR stands for 4 things. It's situation, task, action, and results. And I'll just talk through the 4 of these now. So situation is really, what is the background to your story? Who are the people involved? Where are they from? What situation are they in? And the task is, what task do you or the people in your story aim to complete as a result of the situation? So the situation might outline a problem or an opportunity, and the task is what you, the people involved in your story, want to do as a result of that situation. And then action is getting into the detail of what you actually did. How did you or the people in your story complete the task, and what skills did you use to do so? And then the result, what was the outcome of these actions, and what effect did it have in your community or on the people you serve? So I realize that's a bit just abstract, so I'll give you an example now. And this is a story from quite a few years ago now of one of our clusters, the Eureka Network. So situation, in the Chabs region of Zambia, it's a rural area, community health workers have to walk a long way across difficult terrain to make health visits. So the cluster realized that bicycles would enable health workers to travel more quickly and more easily and more cheaply, as compared to motor vehicles. And so the action, they launched an online campaign with the support of Eureka Network to raise funds to buy a fleet of bicycles. And the results, the bikes enabled health workers to make more visits and make it easier for cluster members to meet together as well. And again, when I was talking about audience, that's a very basic story. It's the kind of skeleton of the story, isn't it? But in terms of putting meat on those bones, you can really add as much detail as you want. So for example, in the situation, talk about health workers having to walk a long way across difficult terrain. What you could do here is add in the data that Brian talks about, how many health workers, how far do they have to walk, how many health visits are they trying to make, what's the community like that they're trying to serve, what are some of the health problems. You can go into a lot of detail there. And again, with the tasks, so you realize that bicycles would help. How many bicycles would you need? How would the bicycles be kept, and maintained? What routes would they be able to take? Are there kind of suitable paths? All that kind of thing. And then action, so this is how the funds were raised, like who donated, how much did they donate? Where did the donations come from? How was this promoted? Who in the cluster was involved? Again, you can add as much detail as you want. And similarly with the results, you could capture people talking about perhaps some of the patients who are visited by the health workers. You could interview them and find out how they felt as a result of this scheme. Did it enable more visits? Were health visitors able to spend longer on their visits? What came about as a result of this? So again, yeah, you can add as much detail as you want. And in terms of the different ways you can use the STAR model, so I talked about using it in job interviews. Talked about it you can use it in conversation with co-workers, colleagues, donors, whoever. You can use it when giving a talk or presentation. You can use it on your website or social media. Very, very often I'm trying to write a social media post or something like that and trying to explain quite a complex situation, and I can't work out how to do it. And then I remember STAR, and it just helps me structure what I'm trying to say and making it much simpler when you're not an expert storyteller. It can help with that. And also when writing a report, if you're writing reports to donors or whoever, when you really want to add in a lot of detail, you can use the STAR model for that as well. So that's it really. That's the kind of headlines, what I wanted to cover. I'll just end again with this slide and encourage you to think about, so when you think about the things you care about in your organization, your cluster, your group, are you all on the same page? The things you care about, do you have these shared goals, and do you understand yourselves as a group and your identity and purpose and aims? And then relate to that, the audience you're trying to reach. Do you understand who that is? Do you know them well enough? How can you get to know them better? And then the more you know about these two things, then the more you're able to decide really what stories it is you really ought to be telling. I'll finish there. Sarah, am I handing back to you? I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Jake. I'm glad you put that slide back on, because I wanted to say I really liked that. Because before today's meeting, I thought, why would I tell a story? And it's because I'm passionate about something and I really want someone else to have that shared effect that I felt. And that's a really good way of looking at it, is what you care about and what your audience cares about and how to bring that together. So thank you very much. I wanted to make it known to everyone that we will share this recording afterwards. Before we come to an end, we'd like to have time for questions. So if you'd like to put any questions in the chat on the side there, you can direct that at Brian or at Jake, or both can answer and contribute. I'm just looking at the chat side at the moment. Does it make you want to go out and tell a story straight away? That's what I was thinking. I'm certainly going to use stories of my children to help them to listen better. Because if I've told it in a story, then they will take the message away more clearly, perhaps.